Okay, Brad. James Parker. Thanks for sending me your golf swinging, mate. I appreciate it. Just spent a few minutes slowing your swing down and making some notes. Now, you haven't filled the questionnaire out. I sent you the link to fill the questionnaire out so you can learn more about your game and your shot pattern. But the email that you sent me with regards to what you're doing makes a lot of sense. So, we've got a pull and a pull hook. So, if we were gonna, if we spent some time together on the range, the way I would diagnose that would be, at impact, the coming down into impact, the path, right before impact there, it's a little too straight, right? Coming into impact, so we're definitely going to have a tendency to come across it, right, out to in. So that would be where the pull is coming from. The pull hook is going to come from you coming slightly across it, have a tendency to come slightly across it, but you can see through impact here, if we slow it down on this angle, number one, lacking in some lag, right? So we're lacking in the kind of the dynamics of the movement to create lag, and we'll talk about that in a second, right? So we definitely need more lag. That will keep the club head behind our hand and keep more of an angle in our left wrist, right? But the big thing for me that stands out there through impact is number one, just how much you've got your right foot still on the ground. Number two, how you haven't turned out the way of it very well, right? So your shoulders are kind of square, your hips are kind of square at impact. We want them out the way. We want both your shoulders and your hips both turned out the way, like 30 odd degrees, right? That's the pattern you see with the experts, with the PGA Tour pros, right? So obviously when you're lacking in your turn at impact, you're always going to have the tendency to have your hands kind of go ahead of your body and flip the club face and rotate the club face, right? If we stop you there at P8, which is right arm parallel with the ground, right? The big thing that stands out to me there, get you in this position, even though the club's coming out nicely underneath your left shoulder, the big thing that stands out to me there is how much backward, the lack of back bend that you've got, right? So your spine's kind of bending forward still at this point, and at impact we want you back bending backwards, right? So I'll pull some pros up in a second. You see their spine actually bending backwards this way, and then at P8 it's bending backwards even more, right? So not only are you right tilting, right, and you're definitely right tilting because you've got your right shoulder down there pointing downwards that way, so that tells me you're right tilting, but there's no back bend, right? And that back bend is going to contribute to you swinging out, attacking the ball from the inside, right? So just diagnosing what your issues are. Your issues are a pull and a pull hook. Well, you're always going to come across it a little bit from that position there, right? You're always going to have a tendency to swing left, and also the lack of rotation through your right foot staying very much on the ground, and you're not getting your hips forward enough, right? So you can see your hips are only sort of the center of your hips are only there. At impact we want them more over your left foot, right? So not turning hard enough is going to flip the club face over, and then not bending backwards enough is always going to give you the tendency of swinging across it and pulling it, right? So you've got a path problem, you've got a face to path problem, and I would say you've also got a distance problem, right? Because of your lack of lag coming down, right? You can see how, the pattern you see with the pros is as they get down to P5. So P4 is at the top, and then P5 is left arm parallel the ground coming down. The pattern you see with the pros is when their arm's here, the club is behind them this way, right? You can see yours is already there, so coming down, right about there with the left arm, they've still got the club up here somewhere. So you can see how you've dumped the club a little bit. So that's going to contribute to your lack of distance, right? So I think that's more of a dynamics problem, right? And we'll talk a little bit about how you can use the ground a bit better to start developing better footwork to help the dynamics of your swing. As a knock-on effect, with good footwork, it has a knock-on effect through the kinematic sequence all the way up through your legs, through your hips, through your shoulders, through your arms, through your wrists, and then eventually to the club, and then how you deliver the club to the ball, right? So we'll talk about that in a second. So if we were gonna decide what changes need to take place to change your shot pattern, well, we know your shot pattern's a pull. We know it's a pull hook, right? So the first thing I would want to change is where you are there, right? And with regards to bending forward, right? So what do I mean by bending forward as opposed to bending back? Well, let's get a pro up. Someone like Sean O'Hare, that would be a good one. Right, we'll put a little line where his left ear is. Put a little line where your left ear is, right? And we're going to talk about the setup in a second. Now he's hitting a driver, I know that, but I want to give you a good example. Right, so he's there, it's set up. He's there at P8. P8 is right arm parallel with the ground, right? So what I want you to be aware of here is if we draw a line from the centre of his hips to the centre of his shoulders, that's bending backwards, right? You at this point are bending forwards, right? If we draw a line from centre of hips to centre of the shoulders, you're bending forwards, right? So that's not only going to have a big impact on the path, right? You're going to have a tendency to come across it, especially with your longer clubs. When you bend backwards at this point, like Sean O'Hare there on the left, that's going to help you swing out. It's going to help you attack the ball more on the inside, right? And also, it's going to help you produce the power that's needed in the golf swing, right? So how are we gonna get there? That's the issue. So we'll talk about that in a second, right? The next one that I want to point out is the shoulder and the hip turn, right? There's not enough of it, right? If we get you back over here, I think I spoke about this a little bit. But at impact, right, there you can see how your hips are kind of level or back to zero, your shoulders are kind of back to zero. Good example would be Hunter Mahan at impact. Right, hips out the way, so hips are pointing over there, shoulders are pointing over there. Right, 30 odd degrees. That's where we want your shoulders and your hips at impact. Right, so your shoulders and hips aren't turning enough. We need to get them turning more, right? And then obviously, if you're not turning enough at impact, if you're not out the way 30 odd degrees with your shoulders and hips, inevitably that's going to cause your hands to take over, to turn past your body, and that rotates the club face too much, right? So that's going to cause the face to close, and that's where your hook's going to come from. And then the last one with regards to your distance, right? So we talk, so what I'm doing is I'm giving you little points to diagnose what the problems are and what changes we're going to have to make to get rid of these problems, to build you a much better, more efficient golf swing, right? So the last one is just staying on the right leg too much, right? So what do I mean by that? This is going to affect your your distance. It's going to affect the dynamics of the swing, right? So if we stop you, say there, right, and we draw a circle around this right foot, you can see, you know, I'd say the ball, you're still, yes, your heel's coming off the ground, right, but I'd say the ball of your right foot and all your toes are still on the ground, right? Now if we get another, let's use Sean O'Hare again, and we get him at impact, right? So the way I explain it to people is, it's just the inside of your big toe, right? You've got to get used to, and you can do this in slow motion. Just practice where you need to be at in slow motion, or just practice it in a static position. So once you know where you've got to be at impact, you can then make little practice swings, slow motion swings, and get back to that position at impact. Well, there's a few distinct things that we need to do. We need to turn your hips and your shoulders more, right? We definitely need to have more back bend, right? So your hips and your shoulders are kind of level, right? By level, I mean just pointing at the target or target line, parallel with the target line. They're not turned out the way. And also you're not bending backwards enough, right? So that's your impact position. Right, there's your spine. So we want your spine bending backwards this much, look. So we need your head sort of over here somewhere. And that's the pattern you see with the pros is if anything, you know, put a line there next to his left ear, if anything, their head starts going away from the target through impact, right, to get that back bend, right? So that's really worth thinking about, right? Those few things. We need to be more open with the hips and shoulders. We need more back bend, and the only part of your right foot that should be touching the ground is the inside of your big toe, right? So if you can just practice that in a mirror, or practice that in your garage there, just videoing your swing and just get into that position. You don't necessarily have to hit balls, so that you know where you are, you know where you should be, and then just make slow little back swings and come down and make contact with the ball, but get into that position, right? Another way of thinking about it would be, as you're coming through, to try and get your belt buckle pointing upwards, look. Right, if your belt buckle's pointing upwards, then that's going to help you with the back bend, right? Bending backwards. As you get to here, you can see your belt buckle is pointing downwards. That's causing your forward bend. So get your belt buckle pointing upwards, and then it'll help you with your back bend. So how are we gonna, you know, what are the little things that I would recommend to help you implement these changes? Well, the first one would be setup, right? So we need to change, if we draw a few little circles, one center of your hips, one center of your shoulders, you can see your spine angle is already, kind of tilting left, right? So what you see with the pros, where they're hitting a little, you know, pitching wedge not so much, but there's still a tendency to have a little bit of right tilt, right? But you look at that angle, right? He's already got a bit of right tilt in his setup, right? So I would want you to start with a bit of right tilt. When you make your backswing, you've definitely got the right idea, and you can see that how your head starts to move left. You've definitely got the right idea of tilting left on the backswing, but then, like we said, we're not tilting right. Well, we are tilting right because your shoulder's down, right? But there's no back bend, right? There's no back bend this way. right? And best, and you know, to understand back bend, just stand up straight. And obviously, when you set up to the ball, you're going to bend your spine forward. So stand back up straight again, and then bend backwards as if you were going to, you know, if you watch someone who's going to go and do high jump, right? They're going to run up and jump over that pole. You know, you watch the Olympic high jump competitors. They're going to bend. They have to bend their spine backwards, right? That's what I'm talking about. We have to bend backwards, right? That's what you want to. That's what we want to try and do there in that position, right? And like I said, biggest thing to think about would be get your belt buckle going up. Yours is going down. Okay. So that's how I would implement that change. And then with regards to the face to path relationship and distance, the way I would change this, once you've got a better setup, right, and you're just going a little deeper with regards to the setup, right. The best way to do it, the best way to think about it would be, we want the center of your shoulders directly in the middle of your stance, okay. So the center of your shoulder, if we draw a circle there, you see how that's kind of in the middle of your stance. But we want your lower body, your hips, a little bit closer to over your lead foot, right? So that in itself, if I do that with a green line, that in itself, gives you a little bit of right tilt. You see what I'm saying? So I think that's a good way for you to understand how we want to set up to it. Okay, hips are a little bit forward, upper body, head, center of your shoulders. That should always be in the middle of your stance, right? That should always be in the middle of your stance. If we draw a line up from the middle of your stance, right there, you can see your head's already to the left of it, right? And then as we come through, it's even more to the left of it. You look at Sean O'Hare's. It's kind of over it, going back, and then kind of just behind it coming through, right? Which helps the back bend, right? It helps the back bend. So the way that we can do it, once we've got a better setup, mate, with regards to which is going to help your turn, and also help your distance, is I'm watching your lower body. And even though you've got very nice structure to it, your right leg straightens, your left leg flexes, that's all good. Your right hip's moving higher than your left hip, right? For me, you've got too much pressure under this trail foot for too long, right? And you kind of load it up there too much, and then you decide to you actually start the downswing. There's a little bit of movement with your left knee, look, and your hips moving laterally, but I don't really see any pressure being put down into the ground under your lead foot, right? So a good way of thinking about it would be, you need to assume pressure, you need to assume the bias of pressure back under your lead foot before you start the downswing, right? So even though we want to load pressure up under your trail foot going back, by the time you get to the top, you should already be starting to put pressure back under your lead foot, and then on the way down, by the time you've got your left arm parallel with the ground there at P5, you should have maximum pressure under your lead foot. And I just don't see enough of that in the footwork dynamics coming down. And I think that then is what's ultimately dumping the club, right? So what I'm saying is, the better you can improve your footwork, push down under your right foot till halfway back, start to transfer the pressure onto your left foot at the top, then explode into your left foot, right there. Right, it has a knock-on effect throughout the golf swing, and this is what I mean by the lag. Right, look at the angle between his left arm and club, and this is coming down. Look at the angle between your left arm and club. Right, so the harder you push down under this lead foot to start the downswing, then that's going to then start to have a knock-on effect up through your left leg. It'll affect how much you turn your hips. It'll affect how much you turn your torso. It'll affect how much this left arm pulls the club down, and then it'll have a knock-on effect on the angle you can create with your left arm and the shaft. Right? So that's how I would. That's how, and obviously the harder you push down under this lead foot, that's going to help you really increase your turn with your hips and help you really increase your turn with your shoulders. Right? So that's really how we get lag. It all starts from the ground. It all starts from the ground up. All right. So with that little tip in itself, I've got a video course inside the website called the Weight and Footwork Model. I'd go through that a couple of times just so you understand it, and it goes in depth as to where we should be with our weight, meaning how much we should be sliding our hips, getting the mass over our lead foot, but also how much pressure we should have under each foot at different points in the swing. All right. So in a nutshell, you need to explode onto your left foot earlier, right? Kind of get the bias under that lead foot before you start the downswing, and then explode into your lead foot to start the downswing. And that in itself will help you turn harder, right? Help you get into that impact position where your hips and your shoulders are more turned out the way. All right. So that's it, Brad. If you have any questions, mate, just shoot me over an email or a text, and I'll get back to you when I can. Cheers, mate.